Right? Yeah, we're right. Okay, cool. Still waiting for the computer. Okay, before we get to the Abraham Lincoln chain accord, we're going to keep going through Hague 4 laws of war on land. We got through Article 6. So, Article 7, the government into whose hands prisoners of war have fallen is charged with their maintenance in default of special agreement between the belligerents. Prisoners of war shall be treated as regards rations, quarters an interesting word, and clothing on the same footing as the troops of the government which captured them. So capture. Maintenance. Fallen. Article 8. Prisoners of war shall be subject to the laws, regulations, and orders in force in the army of the state in the power of which they are. Any act of insubordination justifies the adoption towards them of such measures of severity as may be considered necessary. Escaped prisoners who are retaken before being able to rejoin their own army or before leaving the territory occupied by the army which captured them are liable to disciplinary punishment. Prisoners who, after succeeding in escaping, are again taken prisoners are not liable to any punishment on account of their previous escape. Article 9. Every prisoner of war is bound to give, if questioned on the subject, his true name and rank, and if he infringes this rule, he is liable to have the advantages given to prisoners of his class curtailed. Article 10. Prisoners of war may be set at liberty on parole if the laws of their country allow it, and in such cases they are bound on their personal honor scrupulously to fulfill, both towards their own government and the government by which they were made prisoners, the engagements they may have contracted. In such cases, their own government is bound neither to require of nor accept from them any service incompatible with the parole given. So what is parole? Prisoners of war may be set at liberté, on parole if the laws of their country allow it. And in such cases, they are bound on their personal honour scrupulously to fulfill both towards their own government and the government by which they were made prisoners the engagements they may have contracted. That says to me, a contract's a contract. To your own government, to their own government, or the government by which they were made prisoners. So there's two parties trying to sit on one seat, the way I see it. Article 11. A prisoner of war cannot be compelled to accept his liberty on parole. Similarly, the hostile government is not obliged to accede to the request of a prisoner to be set at liberty on parole. So parole is not liberty. Parole. You can't be compelled to accept liberty on parole. So can you be on parole and remain a prisoner? I think Lincoln might have the answer, but I'm just guessing. Article 12. Prisoners of war liberated on parole and recaptured bearing arms against the government to which they had pledged their honour or against the allies of that government forfeit their right to be treated as prisoners of war and may be put on trial before the courts. To me, that reads like it's to do with not misusing a flag or a standing. Oh, I just realized I haven't been changing the screen on any of these articles. I think it's okay now because they all pretty much line up. It seemed to be only the preamble that differed. And my internet is useless anyway, so this is a listening one. It's, to be true to your allegiance. Seems to me what Article 12 is saying. Prisoners of war liberated on parole and recaptured bearing arms against the government to which they had pledged their honour or against the allies of that government forfeit their right to be treated as prisoners of war and may be put on trial before the courts. So that sounds like treachery. A wolf in sheep's clothing, which is forbidden. Article 13. Individuals following an army without directly belonging to it, such as newspaper correspondents or reporters, sutlers, and I looked up the definition of sutlers in my 1975 dictionary, which said they were folks selling wares to armies on a trail, providing supplies so they aligned like correspondence reporters or contractors who fall into the enemy's hands, and whom the latter thinks it expedient to detain, are entitled to be treated as prisoners of war, provided they are in possession of a certificate from the military authorities of the army which they were accompanying. Papers, please. Article 14. A Bureau for Information relative to prisoners of war is instituted at the commencement of hostilities in each of the belligerent states, and when necessary, in neutral countries which have received belligerents on their territory. The business of this Bureau is to reply to all inquiries about the prisoners, to receive from the various services concerned full information respecting internments and transfers, releases on parole, exchanges, escapes, admissions into hospital, deaths, as well as all other information necessary to enable it to make out and keep up to date an individual return for each prisoner of war. The Bureau must state in this return the regimental number, name and surname, age, place of origin, rank, unit, wounds, date and place of capture, internment, wounding, and death, as well as any observations of a special character. The individual return shall be sent to the government of the other belligerent after the conclusion of peace. Conclusion of peace. Would think that would be the commencement of peace. Now, all debts must be paid, is how that reads to me. It is also the business of the Information Bureau to gather and keep together all personal effects, valuables, letters, etc., found on the field of battle or left by prisoners who have been released on parole or exchanged, or who have escaped or died in hospitals or ambulances, and to forward them to those concerned. Business as usual for the Bureau of Information. Article 15, Societies for the Relief of Prisoners of War, if properly constituted. Sorry, I just realised that I haven't gone to Article 15 on your screen if you're watching. If properly constituted in accordance with the laws of their country and with the object of serving as the channel for charitable effort, shall receive from the belligerents for themselves and their duly accredited agents every facility. Facile is easy in French. I don't know much French, but facility is every easement for the efficient performance of their humane task within the bounds imposed by military exigencies and administrative regulations. I'm just going to pause while I look up exigency. So my 1975 dictionary is telling me that exigency, a situation which demands immediate attention, an emergency, plural, urgent necessities. Exigent, urgent, demanding prompt attention. I try and find my place. Within the bounds imposed by military urgencies, exigencies, and administrative regulations, representatives of these societies, when furnished with a personal permit by the military authorities, may, on giving and undertaking in writing to comply with all measures of order and police which they may have to issue, be admitted to the places of internment for the purpose of distributing relief, as also to the halting places of repatriated prisoners. So, societies for the relief of prisoners of war, if properly constituted, in accordance with the laws of their country, and with the object of serving as the channel for charitable effort, shall receive from the belligerents, which I now comprehend to mean both fighting parties. I shouldn't say comprehend. It seems to me that that's what it means. And their duly accredited agents, every facility for the efficient performance of their humane task within the bounds imposed by military exigencies, situations, and administrative regulation. Yeah, picture starting to take shape. This words that end in "met." If you've been following Stephen's work, you're probably familiar with that. I don't know the term for it. MENT, that word particle, pertaining to the mind. So, internment, government, commencement. Article 16, Information Bureau enjoy the privilege of free carriage. Letters, money orders and valuables, as well as postal parcels intended for prisoners of war or dispatched by them shall be exempt from all postage charges in the countries of origin and destination, as well as in the countries they pass through. So why do we pay for postage? Does this mean we aren't prisoners? Presents and relief in kind for prisoners of war shall be admitted free of all import or other duties, as well as any payment for carriage by state railways. Seems this is a long list of rules, of custom, of convention, covenant that has been broken, not adhered to. So it's all coming unglued. Article 17, officers taken prisoners shall receive the same rate of pay as officers of corresponding rank in the country where they are detained. The amount shall be refunded by their own government. Take no prisoners. It doesn't pay, or it ought to pay to take prisoners. That's how I read that. So who isn't making good on their debts here? Article 18, prisoners of war shall enjoy complete liberty in the exercise of their religion, including attendance at the services of their own church, on the sole condition that they comply with the police regulations issued by the military authorities. So when you couldn't go to church during lockdown from the police regulations, were they issued by the military authorities, or who are then military authorities in this case? Who took command? Militarized policing. Would need to show why they decided they didn't need to adhere to Article 18 of this convention. Article 19. The wills of prisoners of war are received or drawn up in the same way as for soldiers of the National Army. The same rule. Before I move on there, this does all seem, it strikes me as though it's written assuming that war is the norm. Peace would appear rare. The same rules shall be followed as regards documents concerning the certification of the death, and also as to the burials of prisoners of war, due regard being paid to their grade and rank. So it's almost like all this is written as a backdrop for a perpetual state of war. These would appear to be the laws on the table. Article 20, after the conclusion of peace, the repatriation of prisoners of war shall be carried out as quickly as possible. After the conclusion of peace. So maybe I'm getting a little stuck on that one. Peace after the conclusion of peace. But there's no comma. Because the conclusion of peace, depending how I read it, might seem to mean the commencement of war. Not sure how to take that. So chapter 3, the sick and wounded, article 21, the obligations of belligerents with regard to the sick and wounded are governed by the Geneva Convention. Section 2 of hostilities, chapter 1, means of injuring the enemy, sieges and bombardments. Article 22, belligerents have not got an unlimited right as to the choice of means of injuring the enemy. And just noting a difference on what's on the IHL database here. Just seems to be the order of the words have changed. Meaning seems at first glance to be the same. Article 23. In addition to the prohibitions provided by special conventions, it is particularly forbidden: A, to employ poison or poisoned weapons. Note particularly, or now looking at the screen as opposed to my printout, it says it is especially, particular, especial. It's forbidden either way. To employ poison or poisoned weapons. B, to kill or wound by treachery individuals belonging to the hostile nation or army. C, to kill or wound an enemy who, having laid down his arms, or no longer having means of defense, has surrendered at discretion. So what is shooting at unarmed civilians at a shrine of remembrance? How many articles did that action violate? D. To declare that no quarter will be given. That one's a can of worms, I think. What does it mean by a quarter? Is it to be taken literally? Or is that the everyday sense of the word quarter in this context is, as I understand it, a place to reside, to rest. So if you have no, like a home, you will not be given a home. So what is a right to rent? A right to employment? Where the heading is slavery. E. To employ arms, projectiles, or material calculated to cause unnecessary suffering. So what is necessary? What is unnecessary? Was it necessary to deploy rubber bullets, projectiles like tear gas canisters at people, unarmed people, on their holy ground? I'd call that unnecessary. What was the necessitation for that action? Who gave that command? Shane Patton? Or did it come from higher up? Who's in command? Who's been in command? F. To make improper use of a flag of truce, of the national flag, or of the military insignia and uniform of the enemy, as well as of the distinctive signs of the Geneva Convention. Comes back to treachery, wolf in sheep's clothing. B. G. To destroy or seize enemy property, unless such destruction or seizure be imperatively demanded by the necessities of war. So to destroy or seize enemy property, if you can hear a bomb ticking in the enemy's briefcase, then you may seize or destroy it. But it needs to be demanded by the necessities of war. But once again, we get back to the question of what is war? Is it the physical fighting? Or is it the state of mind? The state of power? Who holds power? H. To declare abolished, suspended, or inadmissible the right of the subjects of the hostile party to institute legal proceedings. And I just noticed that reads very differently in my copy as to what's on the IHL database. In my copy, a belligerent is likewise forbidden to compel the subjects of the hostile party to take part in the operations of war directed against their own country, even if they were in the service of the belligerent before the commencement of the war. So that kind of seems like something important. You can't put the gun in someone's hand and get them to shoot their own people. Article 24, and I'll finish up shortly because this is getting long. Ruses of war and the employment of measures necessary for obtaining information about the enemy and the country are considered permissible. So a ruse is a charade, a misrepresentation of war, and the employment of measures necessary for obtaining information about the enemy and the country are considered permissible. So disinformation, misinformation is permissible under Hague 4, Laws of War on Land. That's a can of worms in itself, that one. Article 25. The attack or bombardment by any means whatever of undefended towns, villages, dwellings, or buildings is forbidden. And I noticed they've changed that to the word prohibited. Prohibit, forbid. Interesting distinguishment. Wonder what the implications are. Article 26. The officer in command of an attacking force must do all in his power to warn the authorities before commencing a bombardment, except in cases of assault So they've flipped the order of that wording. So what is assault? Because it reads immediately as though assault is lawful. Don't need to warn the authorities before commencing an assault. But I guess all of this goes two ways, doesn't it? So who's to say? Well, I might just pause and I'll look up the word assault. Assault, an attack or violent onset, physical or verbal, a threat or attempt to injure a person, a sudden strong attack on a fortified defense. So that seems to be the key ingredient. A strong attack on a fortified defense. So it's not assault when you fire on an unarmed people with their hands in the air, running away, shooting them in the back. Is not assault. It is a it's bombardment, but not assault. It's a cowardly attack is what it is. So, wouldn't want to be the one who issued those commands. Article 27. In sieges and bombardments, all necessary steps must be taken to spare as far as possible buildings dedicated to public worship, art, science, or charitable purposes, historic monuments, hospitals, and places where the sick and wounded are collected, provided they are not being used at the time for military purposes. I.e., if you set up your army corps in a hospital, you can't call foul on war crimes and the other belligerent because you happen to be in one of those buildings. It is the duty of the besieged to indicate such buildings or places by distinctive and visible signs, which shall be notified to the enemy beforehand. It almost reads as though a war is a series of negotiations and agreements rather than what we are accustomed to picture in our minds of fodder laying waste to each other. Okay, I'll finish with Article 28 because we get on to the second chapter after this. 28. The giving over to pillage of a town or place, even when taken by assault, is forbidden. And IHL has it is prohibited.